Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Well, today, guys, I'm coming to you solo. It's been a minute, and so I just want to give you an update on what I've been up to, what I'm seeing, and where I think we go from here. So last week, guys, I was on the road. I started down in Florida, and then I headed up to New York City. And in Florida, we did a town hall meeting in Florida's 7th Congressional District. And that is represented by a guy, I use the word represented loosely, by a guy named Corey Mills, who is a carpetbagger. He's not actually from Florida, nor is he from the 7th Congressional District. He, in his off time, in his past life, is an actual arms dealer. He's a gun runner. He once defaulted on a $5 million loan to the Small Business Administration. And if all of that isn't enough, he is also guilty of stolen valor. Yes, he was in the military, but he claims a whole bunch of experiences and awards that are not his. And lastly, but certainly not least, a few weeks ago, he was accused, allegedly, of abusing his girlfriend, not his wife. And so we went down there to a town called Oviedo, Florida, and we were in the grill room of the local municipal golf course there. I co-hosted the event with a woman named Jennifer Adams, who's been on the podcast before. She ran against Mills last year. She's thinking about doing it again. And we had about 50 people show up, and it was a great conversation. We were there for a couple of hours. We had folks from all walks of life, mostly from very nearby, but some people had come a little ways. We had one gentleman, Alexander, who this was the first political thing he'd ever been a part of, but he felt like in this time he needed to come make his voice heard. Everyone in the crowd, almost to a person, said they had reached out to Corey Mills' office about one concern or another they'd had since Republicans took over both in Congress and at the White House in January. Very few of them had gotten any response, certainly any response that was addressing their concerns. But for me, the most important and perhaps poignant moment of the night was when a young man named JJ, who suffers from cerebral palsy, asked if he could make a statement. Now, JJ, the only way he can communicate is by using his nose to tap out a message on the iPad attached to his wheelchair. And in the course of about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, he gave the most thoughtful, eloquent, and heartfelt defense of Medicaid. He needs Medicaid support because he obviously has a lot going on. And he's 21 years old. He's a junior in college there in the area. And he and his mother have dealt with everything that God, the world, and anybody else could throw at them. And they are persevering. And to me, JJ is the story of what America should be, that in the face of incomprehensible odds on his own part and enormous hardship on the part of his mother, God bless her, that the aid they need to just live a life is likely on the chopping block. And I think that JJ's story is one that needs to be told. And I bet there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of stories like JJ's across the country where arbitrary and harmful cuts to what people assumed would be aid they would receive are going to have a real and negative, incredibly negative effect on the lives of people, Americans, our neighbors. And I think that it's important for all of us to stand up and make our voices heard that these things are not okay, that we need to do more town halls in places like Corey Mills' district, such that he feels the pressure, that they all feel the pressure. And that, when the time comes to vote on things, that they understand that it's not just voting in the abstract, that they're not just pressing yes or no on a button on the floor of the House of Representatives or on the floor of the United States Senate, but that decision is going to affect somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million lives that they are responsible for. They are the representatives, the elected representatives of each and every American. And too many of them have taken that for granted. And I think that they should feel the heat. They should feel the pressure. They're beyond feeling shame. So let's not expect anything that is not going to happen. But they should absolutely know that we are watching, we are listening, and we are organizing. Let me say one more thing about town hall meetings. And I wrote this in my latest Substack, which I will post on the show notes here. So at the union, go to jointheunion.us, we are holding town hall meetings for a purpose. Yes, it's to make sure that the stories like JJ's get told and the odious nature of people like Corey Mills is brought to a wider audience, but also because we are organizing. The 50 people there who came to see us at the grill room, we want those people to come out again. And we made a challenge to them. The next time we have one of these, probably in the next, 4 or 6 weeks, we want you to bring somebody with you. So the next time we have one, if everybody can attend, it won't be 50 people, it'll be 100 people. And after that, maybe it's 200 people. And so we start to organize at the grassroots level. We start to connect at the grassroots level, not necessarily for political reasons, although we will get to that, but so that we start to create and foster and found the army that is ultimately going to take our country back. Because when regimes like Donald Trump's end, they are already leaving an enormous mess. They will leave unspeakable damage and destruction when the time comes. And we are all going to have to work together to rebuild the country. And my guess is we're not going to rebuild it in the way we found it, because that's looking backward, and we'll need to look forward. And so for anybody who's hosting a town hall meeting, who's having one, what is the broader purpose? Right? When people come, are you collecting their information? Are you asking them to get involved in their communities? Or is it just, a sort of collective scream at the wind? If that's all it is, that's fine. But I think we're missing an opportunity, which is, if folks are motivated, some of them maybe for the first time, to leave their homes and come to a public place and be next to their neighbors and the people that live in their town or their city, then we should take advantage of that energy and we should channel it into something positive. Again, whether or not that's more meetups, whether or not that's community action, whether or not that's supporting local organizations that are going to need help, as here in Utah, as I think I might have mentioned in a previous show. If not, I'll just tell you that they cut all of the funding, state funding, for victims of spousal and child abuse. Now, in the town I live in, the Peace House, right, its budget's gone. There's a really good chance that the people in my community can make sure that they're able to operate. But there's going to be a lot of people in a lot of places in a state like Utah, and I assume this will happen elsewhere, where, without that funding, right, people who need desperate services and need that help, like, they're not going to get it unless it comes from their friends and neighbors. And so we have to be, guys, those friends and neighbors. I think also, just strategically, if strategy is how you corner the bear, then a tactic is how you kill the bear. Well, we have too many tactics running around, not in the service of any broader strategy or objective or goals. And so town hall meetings should be a very key public and illustrative part of an overall strategy by the opposition to show that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are very unhappy about what's going on in Washington, D.C. But if they're just happening in the abstract, I think we're missing a real opportunity. Let me also just say this. If you are hosting a town hall meeting and the only reason you're collecting people's information is to ask them to volunteer 18 months from now, or so that you can put them on a donor list, you're doing it wrong. We need to organize. We need to gather. We need to get people together outside the context of an election. Yes, election time will come. But until and unless we have built out the framework and the foundation of people who are involved in their communities and are trusted messengers, just showing up at someone's door 6 weeks before an election is not going to work. I don't know how many more times we have to say that and how many more times we have to see that. All right. And so I want to thank all the fine people from Oviedo, Florida, and Jennifer Adams and everybody else who helped put on our event there. So, guys, I headed up to New York City. Just as an aside, personal thing, I saw Glenn Ross, the play, which David Mamet was originally a play. Then it was made into a brilliant movie back, I think, like in the late 80s or early 90s. This was Bill Burr. This was Kieran Culkin, Bob Odenkirk, Michael McKean. Guys, it's a short play. It's only like an hour and 20 minutes, but it was incredible. I'm not much of a Broadway guy, but it was really, really cool. And it was a nice departure from, the day-to-day rigmarole of what so many of us are living through. And so I say this not to be a shill for Broadway or for Times Square or anything like that, but I do think it is important to get out and do things for fun, culturally, that are separate and apart from what we're facing politically, personally, and nationally today. So I again co-hosted another gathering, this one in New York City, a very different crowd, but very earnest people. And one thing I imparted to them, and I hope that everyone here will take to heart as well, is it took us a long time to get into this whole gang. This summer it'll be 10 years since Donald Trump came down the escalator. And it's weird to walk by Trump Tower now. It's all blocked off and everything else. I didn't even think about it. I just happened to be walking down Fifth Avenue. People taking pictures and everything. Don't get me started. Anyway, but I got a lot of like, what are we going to do right now? How are we going to fix this right now? What are we going to do? How are we going to do? What's the slogan? What's it going to say on the bumper sticker? What are they have their red hats. What are our hats going to look like? We need ads. We need this. And as I said, what we have to do now is work. It's not going to be fast. A lot of days it's not going to be sexy. Oftentimes it might not even feel particularly rewarding, but it is what we have to do. We have to find a starting point, and it's going to be in the heart of every American who cares about the future of this country and what our kids, and if you have grandkids, what your grandkids' world is going to look like, because I don't want it to look like this, and I don't want it to look like what it's going to become, I'm afraid, in the next couple of years. But now is the time to say, okay, what are we going to do? And it's not just going to be, okay, well, the Democrats are going to take the House back in 2026. Maybe, right? But like, we shouldn't, as I've said so many times, guys, we should take nothing for granted. I mean, how many more times do we have to take things for granted? Like, if we keep doing the things that got us to this place, why do we think doing more of them will get us out of it? And so I think it's time to reset 100% on everything we know, everything we thought of in opposition to what we're seeing. It is not okay for people with visas to be pulled off the street. That is not okay. It is not okay for people, even if they are bad people, to be sent to, some hellish place on earth in El Salvador without due process. Those things aren't okay. And I'll say this, and I'll paraphrase my good friend Tom Nichols and Charlie Sykes. They were having a conversation. The Trump administration is brilliantly evil when they do this. They intentionally go after people with Arabic names. They intentionally go after people, Latino people, generally men covered in gang tattoos, because it gives people there's enough people who could say, well, at least it's not me. Right. And it might not be you, it might not be me in this moment, but that's the predicate, as history has taught us. And I, at this event I went to, a gentleman said something I thought was brilliant. He said, history doesn't repeat, but human nature does. And we have seen what human nature is doing, which is, we are in a place right now, whether it's the average American, or whether or not it's media outlets, banks, big law firms, even, Democrats in Washington, D.C., everybody is in a resource hoarding mode at this point. How do I protect what I have? How do I make sure that I give in just enough so that the dragon leaves me alone? Guys, human nature teaches that once you give in to the bully, they never leave you alone. If you give the bully your lunch money on Monday, he's going to come back for it again on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. You know why? Because he knows he's got you. We cannot do that. Like, too many institutions are deciding maybe it will just pass me by. It won't. It never has. Human nature teaches us that those who perpetrate unabashed aggression will not stop until somebody stands athwart history and says no. And we must do more of that. And we must demand that those people who claim to be arbiters of law and order, truth, justice, open expression, start to stand up for yourselves. Start to stand up for yourselves, because as you collapse, so too will whatever last foot and a half of guardrail is left on this thing. And, I was doing an interview this morning. Somebody said, "Are you surprised by any of this?" I said, "I'm not. There's a reason why my heart rate doesn't really spike and my blood pressure doesn't go up. I'm not surprised by any of this. That doesn't mean it's okay. It means that what we're seeing now is prelude to more and more things that we're going to see. Guys, we're 90 days into this, if that, right? Like, no, we're not even. It's like 75 days. 75 days from now, where will we be? 75 days after that, where will we be? We're not going to be in a better place. We're going to be in a worse place, because these folks are acting as if they don't care. You know why? Because they don't. Now, just because they don't care doesn't mean we shouldn't care. And again, that's why we spend way too much time up here in the clouds, and I'm guilty of this, and we got to get way closer to the ground. We got to spend a lot more time getting to know our communities, getting to know our neighbors, talking to people, finding out what it is they need and what they're concerned about. Is there politics at play? There will be, but are we going to be able to secure that person's vote if we're not trusted messengers, if we're not people those folks know as someone they can go to as an honest broker for what is good and what is bad in the face of, 24/7, 365 right-wing media? We need to do that. It's not easy. It's not hard. It's not sexy, as I said, but it is necessary. All right. Let me turn to something I saw just the other day. I'm going to write something up on this tomorrow. Trump is musing about whether or not he can run for a third term. This is not a surprise either. No one should be out. I mean, be outraged, sure, but no one should be surprised by it. Like if your hair's catching on fire because Donald Trump said this, like you haven't been paying attention. Of course he was going to say this. And so this is the question, the parlor game I'm willing to put myself through, because why not, is, 2 years from now. So let's say it's almost April 2027. In a normal period, the primary election or the primary process for the Republican nomination in 2028 will have begun. Do we believe that 2 years from today, that process will have started? I don't think so. I've been wrong about a lot, so my predictions are probably not worth very much, but I wouldn't be surprised if Trump's words are there because, one, he very well might believe it. Two, the people around him very well might want to try and effectuate it. And three, because he wants to keep everybody in stasis. He wants to keep everybody at bay. He doesn't want to name a successor because that by definition means he's going to leave, and he doesn't want to believe that. He already said that he doesn't believe that J.D. Vance is the next in line. And I'd venture to say there's a whole bunch of Republican governors and Republican senators and others who agree with him that they want it to be a process. And so I think that, the next 2 years will be God knows what, but we shouldn't be under any illusion that 2026 is going to be like we thought, as I said, or that 2028 is going to be like anything we thought. I was talking to a guy the other day, the Democrats have such an incredible bench for 2028. Like, okay, great. But so what? We're 3 years from that. We've got a lot of work to do before that. And the idea that somehow this will be solved by, Donald Trump leaving and a Democrat winning the presidency, right? Nothing is as it was and nothing will be as we thought it would be. So the idea that there is a bench for the Democrats in 2028 seems to me to be immaterial, but just not, there's no purpose to it at this moment. And so I think that, again, we have to focus on what's at hand, right? With a little bit, maybe half an eyeball to the future. But we have to deal with what we're dealing with now and hope that if the work we do day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, has any level of success, that yes, maybe 2026 will have some semblance of normalcy and 2028 will have some semblance of normalcy, but we shouldn't expect any of that. All right, guys. I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for listening. I want you to do a few things for me. First, I need you to go to jointheunion.us and sign up, guys. We need volunteers. We did our first town hall meeting. We are going to do many, many more over the course of the coming weeks and months. And I hope that if you have something you want to share, if you think we should come see you, please let us know. Also go to sez.us, SEZ.us, and sign up for the social media network for Sanity. We have had a launch. We are doing well. We are growing, but we need your help. Lastly, guys, I hope you'll go to my Substack, also called The Homefront. Sign up, subscribe, and if you can, become a paid subscriber. Really need your help on that. Guys, you have been an incredible audience. You guys have been an incredible community. I hope that we can grow. I hope you'll share this podcast. I hope you'll share the conversations we're having. I hope you'll ask questions. I hope you'll get involved in your communities. We can do this, guys, but it will take all of us. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.